So the next big job is to take this off, take these sidebars off, loosen the axle where it bolts to the chassis, wheel that back just a little, and try and put the engine back in. And of course, unless I want to take the engine out every time I do an oil change, I need the hole cut in the aluminium right under where the sump plug is. I could use one of those vacuum things that goes down the dipstick port, but it'd be quite cool to have a little thing that plastic cap or something clicks out, and there's your drain plug. But of course, chances are I'll drill a hole in the wrong place, so trying to get that measured up right so I do that correctly, that's going to be fun and games, but you've got to try, you've got to start somewhere, haven't you? So problem with engine crane is it's got the two legs. Hang on. So you've got these two legs, and there you have a distance from there to there, and that has to fit under the car. Of course it won't fit, so options are jack up the back of the car, but what I'm hoping to do is, because the legs are kind of like that, is coming from the back. If I can get in far enough, which I might once the axle's removed, one leg each side, and if there's enough extension on the crane, drop the engine down. So I'm hoping everything will fit. I think I've done it like that once before, but I can't remember. So I've got to clear as much room in the workshop as possible to start wheeling things around. So there's going to have to be a big tidy up first. This is where all the perfect planning starts to get compromised. I've had to use the nibbler from underneath to cut a little section out underneath there, so there's going to have to be an access panel there that removes. The reason is I need access to get the bolts underneath here. I also need to be able to get a jack in under this tube which runs under here, because I need some way of supporting the rear of the chassis. Because my lovely bodywork comes right up to the end, it means I was just putting the jack under these box section tubes under the ends when I took the rear axle off. Of course now I can't do that, there's actually no room. So rather than chop the end of the body back, the least worst option was to cut an access hatch there underneath, and you can have a little panel that screws on to cover it. So yeah, I gave it a lot of thought, and then thought, well, you know, that's probably the simplest solution. So I can put a jack under there, support the rear of the frame, because I've got to take the axle off, just slide it back a little bit to drop the engine in, and then I've got to wiggle it back in and get those splines to engage. This piece of box section is coming off. That was just a temporary structure that was welded on right at the start of the project to keep the spacing correct here of the ends of the chassis, but since then I've got my U-tube. It still needs a bit more welding, because I welded that in when the car was upside down, so now it's the right way up. I need to cut this off, finish off the welding, then do an engine test fit. So my engine's ready to go, engine crane's ready to go, got a bit of space to manoeuvre. I should be able to get the crane right in tight to, well, pretty well in actually, with a leg going off each side, and then the axle just removed temporarily. Yeah, that's the plan. Right, after a lot of hammering and grinding, I've got this off, which improves access a lot. So there's a little bit more welding to do around here and here before I attempt to put the engine in. Okay, so you can see I can just get the jack under there. It's got a cup shaped top on it, so that U-tube sits in it and it just clears the aluminium without bending it, because I don't want the jack sticking this way, because it'll interfere with my engine crane when it comes in from the back. So next thing now is to undo these big bolts, remove the back axle. I've taken the adapter off and I've put the adapter on here, and we've split pinned the lower two bolts because it's easier to do it now than when it's in. I'll do these later. I need some more washers, because because I seem to remember that's how I put it in before, and then I brought the back axle up to it and engaged the splines from memory. I have to go back to some of my old videos actually and check, but I think that's what I did. So that's ready. That bolt's just to stop the gasket falling off. Finished up the little bits of welding that were left around there. My concrete floor was flat, wasn't it? Right, forward. There we are. Not bad. I'm going to put this somewhere now. Still need to do that or not. Right, so I noticed this last time. There's just a little edge on this casting which needed to come off to get it to fit. So now keep going down. Looking good, just clearing there, that's good. Right, I'm going to put some bolts loosely through there now. Take this off and show you what I'm doing. So these bolts go into captive nuts, which have already been welded underneath. These, I don't know what's happened, the holes seem a couple of millimeters off, so just as a guide I've got slightly slimmer bolts just to locate it as I drop the engine the rest of the way. So I've lost my handle yet again, here we are. So I'm just going to drop it the rest of the way. It should then be, of course, didn't allow for that. Is it going to work? Yes. Right, the other thing is, there's some spare room here for my extractor exhaust, so if my tubes come down like that, like that, like that, this one being longer, they all join together about here, under there, then the inlet for the extractor can be a panel that runs from under here down to there in a kind of curve, sucking air from the radiator under here, and then there'll be an oval exhaust area here. Sort of the exhaust, and it'll be bigger than you might expect it to be, but it'll be flush with the body, it won't stick out, and the ends of the exhaust pipes will be probably end about here, so in the middle of this tunnel, which will start here because the radiator will be here, so it'll curve around, sucking air through there and then out through that area there, so you get a nice sort of suction effect hopefully on the radiator, which will be there. So the next thing is put the back axle in and see if I can mate up the drive to the axle. It worked last time, so it should work this time unless something's moved. Right, this is a bit hard to explain, but how to get this back in and how to get this to mate up. Basically, you have, what I found is you have the frame a bit lower than the back axle, so you can see the back axle input spline isn't like that, it's sloping downwards. It was sloping downwards, and then you jiggle, and then because of the universal joint here, the female spline part is not sticking out straight, it's dropped down. It's resting on the bottom of this. So what you do is you angle the male spline part of the axle down as well, and then you jiggle it forward because it's on the rollers till they touch each other. So the female part is angled down, the male part's angled down, they touch each other, and then by push it in with your knee so they stay touching, you twist the axle back and it will lift the male spline because it's pushing against the female one, even though it's not gone in because they're not lined up yet, they're at an angle to each other. It lifts it up, you lift it up, and then you jiggle, 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 and then eventually it'll go in just a little bit. So now you see it's gone in, it's a little bit, but now this is offline, this section, because of course, if you can see, the chassis is a bit lower than the back axle, only a bit. So now, because I've got a jack under this, I jack it back up till it's all straight, so these mounting plates line up again. Then it should slide in, and then I can do it up with the bolts. So if I jack it up a bit, I mean, oh, have to remember to take that out. And we'll have to remember not to crunch the gasket up. So just put that there for now. Right, so we're going to jack it up a bit. I can only do tiny jack movements because the handle's hitting the body. Not to worry. So you bring it up till they're in line each other, pretty much in line with each other, and then should slide in onto the splines, you hope. About there. Right, let's try that. So, because everything's greased, it should be able to work this in and the splines in as well. There it goes, you see. Right, now I'm going to stop there before I ruin the gasket. I need to get this gasket back up and get at least one bolt loosely through. Maybe there. Ooh. Right, so what I'm going to do, I won't bother filming this because it'll take forever. Put the bolts in, gently bring them tight. At the same time, I'm going to put these mega clamps between here and here, and just pulls the whole thing together until these big bolts match up. So it's going to take a while. Something like that. There we are, so back on the ground, engine's in. Just need to order some 2 bolts for that end, they're not quite the right length for the ones I've got. So what can I do next? Well, the fun things are things like the gear linkage. I might rough out my exhaust system in cardboard actually. Oh yeah, I need to get my radiator mended. If you remember from when I got the engine running, this radiator, it kind of works, it holds water, it got a few drips and a bit of a bash in the middle there, and it's obviously had some previous repairs, so I need to take that somewhere really and get it properly repaired or record or something. Yeah, I might mock up the outer tube of the extractor exhaust in cardboard, just so I've got it in my mind where it's going to go, and then send the radiator off to be repaired and start thinking about the gear change linkage. I'm just looking at this actually, the radiator only comes to about here, which means I could actually probably put a battery there. Be quite neat, wouldn't it? Or even that way round. Yeah, that'd be handy. fuel tank probably come over here, this area with a curved top. This will all be gear linkage. That's a bit of spare room there. Yeah, well, it might all fit yet.